Thanks very much, Alan. So I had this speech all prepared, and now it's all changed in the last day. But what remains the same is I want to thank you for inviting me. I know the time has bounced around a little bit, and events of the day have probably changed some of your focus and maybe some of your questions. And I am going to take a few questions after, Mr. Chair, if that's okay. If there's a will of the members here to want to have questions, I'm certainly happy to do that. I want to mention, of course, I've got my Deputy Minister, Grant Doak, here as well. Tremendous, long-time public servant for the province of Manitoba in many different capacities in our province, and just an outstanding civil public servant. And could you give him a round of applause as well? Do you want to sit down or you stand up? We had all the tough questions being answered by David Yeo downstairs. As already mentioned, we refer to him as the department's encyclopedia, because whenever we don't have an answer, we pull David off the shelf, and he does, because of the tremendous history he has in the department, and we're very, very appreciative of the work that he does and many others in the department as well. So as you know, we just made an announcement a few minutes ago together with the Premier, the Minister of Health, and the province's Chief Public Health Officer, that we are going to be suspending classes, closing the schools. I know there's technical terms around some of it, but suspending classes for 3 weeks, including the week of the already scheduled spring break. So 2 additional weeks, but in the middle of that, the regularly scheduled spring break. You know why that decision has been made. I have some concern, obviously, when the public hears this, and I've had lots of interaction with the public, many of who are saying, close schools, many are saying don't close schools. I'm sure that this announcement will meet with mixed reactions, but I hope that you will help and assist in getting the message out that this isn't because schools are not safe places to be for young people. They are safe places to be. But in dealing with a public health issue like COVID-19, what we're trying to do is to flatten the curve in terms of the number of cases that happen. And it is as much about a public response, and it's as much about ensuring that we don't have a tremendous spike in cases. Because if we have a tremendous spike in cases, and this has been demonstrated in other provinces, but more particularly in other countries, it can overwhelm the healthcare system. And if it overwhelms the healthcare system, of course, there are many people within the healthcare system who have many health challenges that have nothing to do with COVID-19, but they need to be treated as well. So we're trying to flatten we know that there are more cases that are going to come. We're trying to minimize the number that come and to try to slow the flow and spread it out a little bit more so that the system can manage it. So the closing of schools, there is evidence, according to the Chief Public Health Officer of Manitoba, that this can help to do that. So I hope that as you're speaking to those within your schools, your areas that you're responsible for, that you tell them this isn't a response to safety within the school, but this is an overall issue when it comes to public health and how do we stem the flow. Manitoba, I think, has been ahead of the curve. We're certainly taking action sooner based on the number of cases that we have, confirmed cases, than other provinces, and it is about being proactive, because we've seen in other countries that where proactive measures are taken, the impact on society as a whole is significantly less. So we're trying to run ahead of the virus and not run behind it. And I hope that these measures, I hope you understand, that's why we had to take the measures. I also hope you understand, I know based on the questions downstairs, and David did a fantastic job of answering many of them, that we may not have all of the answers that you need today, that this is an emerging issue, and this is an emerging problem, and we're in some ways learning together, learning from past experiences, whether it was H1N1 or SARS or what's happening or it's already happened in other parts of the world when it comes to COVID-19. And so I'm sure that you'll have many questions from an operational perspective, and one of the reasons that we wanted to have that week in between the announcement of when schools will actually be suspended, classes be suspended, is that that'll give us some time to help answer some of the questions, but also, of course, ensure that parents have the opportunity to make arrangements, because we know it'll be a disruption for them, and it's going to be a challenge, and you will probably hear some complaints, and you can refer them to me if you want, but there will be those who say this is a significant disruption. But ultimately, we have to make, and government's responsibility is to make decisions on behalf of the safety of all Manitobans and to take the best medical advice that we can get at any given time. There were questions about travel and out of country travel, particularly during spring break, but not just during spring break when it comes to student travel. It is highly recommended that students don't travel, that anyone doesn't travel outside of the country. That's been reinforced at the federal level. Today, chief medical officers around Canada have reinforced that. And it's not simply because of what might happen in another country, but that is certainly part of it. I mean, the early cases on COVID-19 have been from those who are traveling to other parts of the world and then coming back into Canada. But we don't know what will happen in other countries, and if the students, a group of them, or individually are out in other countries, we've found that it's not always that easy to repatriate them when challenges or outbreaks might happen within that country, but also what they're leaving today in Canada might look very different than what they're coming back to a week from now. We all know that a lot has changed in only a week. If you think of how you were thinking about the virus a week ago, things have changed a lot in 7 days, and so students or others who are leaving the country don't have a strong idea of what they might be coming back to, or whether or not they're going to have to self-isolate or self-quarantine for a time when they come back. So it is highly recommended that they are not traveling outside of the country. So thank you again for your help in getting this information out. We will continue to try to be available to you at the department level and otherwise to provide you information over the next week, because you're going to be inundated with questions if you're not already from your phones that you're holding. I'm sure you're getting lots of questions from those who are within your own area, as am I. And we will work through this together as Manitobans do. Premier today used the analogy, and I think it may have been streamed here, about a flood. And he was using the analogy in a different way, but in times of flood, Manitobans have always pulled together and done what they can to help each other, and I don't imagine that this will be any different. And I believe if we do that, we'll be in a much better position than most other provinces when we come to the other side of COVID-19. Now, I was going to speak primarily about the K-12 review, because I'm sure that that's primarily what you're looking to hear about before today's announcement. And I can assure you today's announcement was not intended to distract from that speech, part of the speech. And I want to first say, any time that you're making difficult decisions, or you're looking and reviewing things within government, or I suppose it's true in any organization, it doesn't have to be a government organization, it's not easy. It's not easy for those on any side of the equation. I was health minister for 2.5 years, now education minister for almost 2 years. There are difficult challenges in large organizations, operations, and anytime decisions are made, that is not easy. And I don't minimize that for you as trustees and superintendents, that it's challenging as well for you. And I know that waiting for a report causes anxiety, and I appreciate that, and I'm not minimizing that. I would say, though, that, Alan, your organization has been tremendous through this process. There were about 15,000 presentations in one form or the other to the K-12 Commission, and I think it may have started off a little rocky and then smoothed out. And I understand that the presentations were very well attended, very respectful, and very well done. And I would say that, Alan, to you and to your executive and to all of your members, that you're a key reason for that. And I have nothing but respect for the way that you've handled this process. And I want you to know that publicly. We sometimes converse on Facebook, but that's not a great way to give you that accolades. I want to give it to you in a different way. But I remember many years ago when I was a much younger man, when I was in a vehicle. I found myself in a vehicle with Harry Enns. If you remember Harry Enns, he was a minister for a long time in government, and we were going to Selkirk, I believe it was, for a large community meeting at the Selkirk arena, where a decision had been made by government, and not everybody was particularly happy. In fact, I think there was 3,000 or 4,000 people who were there to express their displeasure. And I said to Minister Enns on the way, this must be a difficult meeting. And he said, you know, it is government's job to have those discussions with people, even when not everybody agrees. And not everybody is going to agree on everything. This morning's or this afternoon's decision on the suspension of schools, as I mentioned, is going to have lots of different opinions. People are going to say you should have closed them right away. In fact, I already saw that on Twitter. Others will say you shouldn't close them at all. You're overreacting. These are difficult sometimes decisions to make. But I do believe that when we have respectful dialogue and when we converse with each other, that ultimately we all come with the same and the right motivations, that everybody is here, and I believe everybody is here, and I don't know you all personally, but I do believe that each of you are here because you want to ensure that our education system is better and that our young people do better, that our students do better. Maybe you've had young people go through the school system yourself. You'll remember your own time in school, or maybe you have grandkids in the school system. I think everybody comes with the same motivation. Does that mean Roy's going to land up in disagreement? I don't think so. But that's sort of what, you know, democracy is about. If everybody's agreeing on something, a democracy is probably not a democracy. It's probably some other form of government. But I do believe when then people come together with the right intentions that they almost always land in a better place and for the right reasons. So the K-12 Commission, our intention is to release it at the end of the month. I know that it came up at the press conference this afternoon whether or not this situation would delay that, and I'll be honest, I don't know. It's not something that we've actually considered because this type of response wasn't really on the radar a month ago. So I don't want to give hard and fast answers because I know how quickly things are changing, things are evolving, but we will be releasing it publicly and everyone can see it. And I hope that when you get the opportunity to see it, we're all humans, and so we all sort of rush the recommendations and read the recommendations first. We go to the back to see what the conclusions are and how does that affect us individually, and that's okay. That's a good human response, and I certainly understand that. But once you've done that, I also think that we should all take a bit of a deep breath and step back and sort of see how does this look as a system overall, and how are we ensuring that overall we're improving the system. And I think when we do that, we'll be able to have dialogue to see how we can continue to move things forward. So I, again, thank you for the work that you do in each of your own individual areas of the province. I know that you come to it with the right intentions, a great heart, and all the abilities and skills that you've acquired over the years that you have been doing the things that you've been doing before you took on these responsibilities. And thank you for your understanding on the issue of the school closures, suspension of classes. It's an evolving issue. We'll continue to try to keep you informed. And when we don't have always the immediate answer, because I don't know if Costco is going to have cleaning supplies tonight or if they'll have toilet paper or what they're going to have, but we will continue to have that communication, and as we work with you and with other provinces to try to ensure that we come out the other side of COVID-19 with good results, with minimal impact on the community, and having learned a lot for the next time we might have to go through something like this. So thank you again. I think Grant and I are going to take some questions if you'd like. Grant will take all the hard ones and I'll take the remaining ones. Mr. Chair, however you want to queue up the questions, that would be fine.
The schools are going to be closed. Some of the schools have daycares in them. Are the daycares going to be functioning, although the classes have been canceled?
It's a good question, and it came up at the press conference. We had some discussions around it over the last little while as we were discussing the possibility of school closures. Different jurisdictions have done it in different ways, so I understand that Ontario, which has gone to a full closure of their public schools, has not closed the daycares, but Quebec, which is, I think, in some ways through a partial closure of their schools, at least the last time I checked, is closing them. So we have not instructed the closure at this point, but I wouldn't want to say that that's not coming. But at this point, no, there's not been an instruction on the closure of daycares within the schools. But again, it's a fast-moving and evolving issue.
Just for the minister and the deputy minister's benefit, if you could also introduce yourself. So that was Trustee Bob Jessen from Lord Selkirk. Microphone 1.
Gary Draper, Fort LaBosse School Division. My question is especially for small divisions that have that 3 or less senior administration in our admin cap, what are the timelines so we know what we'll be doing before September 1st?
So I believe my staff have been in communication with the divisions. We've asked for a baseline from each division, and I believe that we've largely received that. The expectation is that measures would be put in place for all divisions by September, but in the end, we're going to be reasonable in this situation, and if you come up with a reasonable plan, the department will work with you to implement it.
Further questions from the floor? In fairness, I'll encourage trustees, your board chairs and/or your senior administrators asked a series of very good questions of Assistant Deputy Minister Yeo in the session immediately prior to this, so you will have opportunity to get updated on that. But if there are other questions, I would encourage them now. Okay. Minister, Deputy Minister?
Thank
Thank
you
you very
again,
much.
and I
Thank you.
appreciate it's like question period of the House, it's a lot shorter.